In this video, we're going to go over how to solve a quadratic equation using the quadratic formula. And so I have your quadratic formula typed out right here. You've got x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. In the rare chance that you have to have this memorized, there is a song here. It goes to Pop Goes the Weasel. And so I'm just going to play it real quick.
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
So you can kind of help you remember the formula
X is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root
by singing
b
it
squared
to
minus
the
4ac
Pop Goes the Weasel little melody or whatever.
X is equal to negative b.
Okay, so that's probably enough of that. Okay, so that is your formula. And so when you use this, these need to be in standard form. Again, just like whenever you are factoring. So again, standard form is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. What we're looking for there is that this equals 0. So you got everything to one side and equals 0 on the other. So example 2 is in standard form for us. And so I'm going to go ahead and list out my a, b, and c. My a goes with my x squared term. So my x squared here is the very beginning. So if I don't see anything, that means my a is 1. B goes with my x, which is negative 4. And then c is your constant. So it is 2. And so then once you have that, now we're just going to plug this in. So I've got x equals negative b. That negative b does not mean that it's a negative here. It means we're always changing the sign. So because my b is negative here, negative 4 makes us plus 4. Okay, that negative b means I'm changing the sign. So negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared. When I put this in, I have to substitute that in with parentheses. If I put negative 4 squared without parentheses, I get a negative 16. But when I substitute it in correctly with parentheses, it is positive. So that will change your answer if you do not use parentheses there, specifically with a negative number. So b squared minus 4 times a, my a is 1, times c, which is 2. And I'm going to extend that bar over because the quadratic formula says the square root of all of this. And then it is all over 2a. So not just the square root, but the 4 and the plus or minus. It is all over 2 times a, which is still 1. Okay, so let's simplify now. When I simplify, I've got 4 plus or minus. I'm going to have the square root of something. We're going to figure out what that something is. And then 2 times 1 gives me 2. So I'm going to put all of this in my calculator just the way I see it. I've got negative 4 in parentheses squared minus 4 times 1 times 2. And I get 8. This is a correct answer. My math lab will not take it and count it as right because it needs to be fully simplified. I can simplify the square root of 8. So I'm going to come over here and break down 8. 8 is 4 times 2, and 4 is 2 times 2. So my pair of 2's here come out And then this 2 here stays inside. And now this is all over 2. When I taught this in high school, I would always say these pair of 2s go out of the house for a date. And then this 2 is lonely and he's going to stay inside the house. If that works, yay. And then this is still not fully simplified. Once you break this down, you need to look if the number in front of the plus or minus, the number in front of the radical, and the number here below are all divisible by the same thing. And they are. They're divisible by 2. So 4 divided by 2 is 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Notice that 2 is divided by 2, but I do not mingle what's outside of radicals with what's inside radicals. This stays square root 2. And then 2 divided by 2 is also 1. This, my math lab would take, but these ones aren't really necessary. So I'm going to call my final answer 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. Okay, if you remember from last video, I have a quadratic because I have that squared. So that means I have 2 answers. This represents my 2 answers. This means 2 plus the square root of 2 and 2 minus the square root of 2. And so we can get decimal equivalents. So this is about 3.41 and about 0.59 as my answers. This right here is why the quadratic formula is important. When I get radicals as answers, it means that this is not factorable, but I can still get solutions. And so solving quadratics by factoring limits the quadratics you can solve for because it limits it to only quadratics that are factorable. In the real world, most of our quadratics are probably not going to be factorable. And so the quadratic formula allows us to solve any quadratic every single time. So the ones that are factorable, you can also solve by this method, by the quadratic formula. Okay, example B. This one is not in standard form, and so I do need to put this one in standard form first. Standard form means that this needs to equal 0. So I'm going to take this 2 and bring it over. And I'm going to bring it over by subtracting. So this is x squared plus 8x minus 2 equals 0. So now that I have this in standard form, now I can label my A, B, and C. My A is 1. My B is 8. And my C is -2. You need to make sure you label your A, B, and C from standard form because you can see up here in this equation, it almost looks like my C is a +2, but it needs to be negative. So make sure you put it in standard form first. Otherwise, these signs are going to be off. So now let's plug this into our formula. Because I can't see it, I'm going to go ahead and rewrite it real quick. So x equals -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So substitute in your values. I've got -b, my b is 8, so I'm changing that sign to a -8, plus or minus b squared. Now I'm still putting this in parentheses because it doesn't hurt. This one doesn't matter as much in parentheses as this one. Those negatives make a huge difference. The positives don't. minus 4 times A, which is 1, times C, which is negative 2. And this is all over 2A, which is 2 times 1. So let's simplify. I've got x equals negative 8 plus or minus the square root. 2 times 1 is 2. So let's figure out what goes under that radical. So I have 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 2. And we get 72. And then let's break down 72. $72 is 2 times 36. 36 is 6 times 6. So there's my pair that comes out. You get negative 8 plus or minus 6 square root. This 2 is lonely. He stays inside. All over 2. And for the record, it does not matter how you break the 72 down. If we go 8 and 9, that's 2 and 4, which is 2 and 2. 9 is 3 and 3. We have a pair of 2s and we have a pair of 3s. So 3 times 2 gets me to this 6. And this 2 right here stays inside. Okay, so it doesn't matter how you break it down. Just make sure you break it down and you get your pairs. Okay, like last time, you need to look what's in front of the plus or minus, what's in front of the square root, and what's below. Are they all divisible by the same thing? And yes, they are. They can all be divided by 2. So my final answer is negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. 6 divided by 2 is 3. It does not matter that this is also divisible by 2 because I'm not dividing what's under a radical with what's not under a radical. So this stays square root 2. And then 2 divided by 2 is 1. You can put this all over 1 if you want. But this is our final answer. So this again represents our 2 answers. You've got negative 4 plus 3 square root 2 and negative 4 minus 3 square root 2. I do want to show you that you can check these in your calculator. Okay. So if I go to this one here, I'm going to graph this. I can't graph it in this one. It does have to be all equals 0. And so I'm going to graph x squared plus 8x minus 2. And actually, because I did decimal equivalents here, let's graph this first one. Sorry. Okay, let's put this in our calculator. We've got x squared minus 4x plus 2. I'm going to go ahead and graph on a standard. So I'm going to go zoom 6. And here's my graph. If I come up here to calc, I'm going to go second calc and go to 0. Another name for this is finding the x-intercept or the zeros of your function. And it's finding a 0 because you're finding it when y equals 0. If I want to find this first one here, it wants the left bound, and I am to the left of it. So I'm going to hit enter. And now I need to go to the right bound, and I'll hit enter again. And I get that 0.59 number that we got earlier. If I do the same thing again, go second calc, get that 0. Once left bound, I'm definitely on the left. I'm going to go a little bit closer, maybe right here. Now it wants the right. I'm going to come up here, hit enter again. Notice that your two arrows are, you know, around or on the outside of what we're trying to get, which is this point right here. Your zeros is where it's crossing this x-axis. I already got my 0.59 here, so now I'm trying to find this number here. When you see guess, just hit enter again, and you get that 3.41 that we got earlier. So you can use your calculator to check. It's gonna want the exact answer, so you can't use these decimal equivalents, but you can use your calculator to check that you did solve these correctly.